Elijah came to me with a request. A request that I was not eager to fulfill. He understands that a king who is forced to repeat himself suffers with subjects that are not listening, are not believing, are not willing to understand. And I say willing because there is a point at which every person must look at the depth of truth of a matter. They must see beyond their own personal wants, personal beliefs. For enlightenment, true enlightenment, does not come just to comfort. Though there is much comfort in knowing the truth. But it comes to arouse the mind, the intellect, to make one examine one's own thoughts, direction. And that can be quite uncomfortable. He wanted me to readdress the situation with the children. Because even now, most of you do not understand. There are some very basic precepts that should be universal by now. There should be some concepts that you should be taking for granted by now. And there is great disappointment that most of you do not. So because of the importance of the 144,000, the remnant, and for the sake of children in general, because they are so important to me and to the kingdom. I will do as Elijah asks. He is concerned that if I do not, he's concerned that you will die in your sin. Perhaps he is right. You enjoy pleasure. You have enjoyed pleasure all your life. I do not understand why you would think that same enjoyment of pleasure is not experienced by every living being. So, when you believe that pleasure that you classify as sexual should only be allowed to those that reach the age of majority in your jurisdiction. What you are saying is that what made you happy should not be allowed to others. You are telling yourself that what most people enjoy is not enjoyed by someone below the age of majority in your jurisdiction. I want you to consider how bizarre that thinking is. Would an 18-year-old find something so enriching and pleasurable, yet a 17-year-old would be the victim of a crime and would require therapy, especially if that crime was enjoyed? Would it make any sense that a 16-year-old would not equally enjoy the pleasure the 18-year-old is legally enjoying? Move back further and further and try to imagine at any point at which pleasure is criminal, at which enjoyment equates victimhood. You cannot. You cannot, because certain pleasures that are again considered sexual in nature are always enjoyed. Of course, there are certain things that are not because of physical abilities. I don't think anyone would argue that point. But what we are speaking of is consent. And consent for pleasure does not begin at the age of majority. I do not want to see children suffer because of your prudishness. If you passed laws telling children that other natural functions were not permitted for them until they reached the age of majority. Do you think it would help them evolve, or do you think it would further cripple them? How about breathing, eating, drinking? A person's sexuality is part of them all of their life. I could recite so many studies that might help you believe that truth. Studies of masturbatory movements within the womb, children of all ages pleasuring themselves. It is human nature. What is unnatural is to tell them that they are doing something wrong. When throughout the animal kingdom you see normal sexual interaction from the earliest play as part of a creature's development. So when we see the societal structures guilting children, causing them to need therapy, causing them to suffer in relationships, causing them to even engage in self-mutilation or crimes against others. Know this, that it is your forcing, your will, your personal beliefs upon them by restricting them that is causing all of this. And you think you are doing something noble when you are in fact doing the greatest of sins. I warned you 2,000 odd years ago how it would be better for you to have a millstone around your neck, cast into the deep, than to make one of these little ones stumble. But that is what you have done. Their natural path to evolution, their natural progression into adulthood, you have caused to stumble. You have caused them to have guilt where there is no need for guilt. You have stunted their growth. You have forced innocence, as you call it, upon them. But that is ignorance, not innocence. And because they are not allowed to grow, you have done greater harm than you But because you are stubborn, because so many of you refuse my wisdom, refuse the wisdom of God, I am forced to remove children from your grasp, taking them to my heavenly kingdom, Elysium, where they will grow properly, where they will be nurtured. I cannot do it with you because you have become too old and set in your ways. As I said some 2,000 odd years ago, one must be born again to enter Why? Because if you are reincarnated as a child again, perhaps you can be raised properly. Perhaps then you can understand what is right and what is wrong. I do feel very sorry for you because your minds are so closed. And so very few listening to this message will understand it, will understand why what must be done. There are a few of you that will take the time to do the research, to see the studies, to learn why stunting growth of children sexually is so very harmful. Some of you might even look deeper, unafraid to see what governments tell you is forbidden, understanding how they control you by controlling what is natural. Some of you will make changes. Most will be a tragedy, which is why I am saving only a few, only a remnant. The time is now.